an excellent movement. And then later on, became professional sculptors. Anyway, I've been in communication with the Vatican, and young lady and telling me there's a couple of pieces, and one of them was this charity that made a copy of in the Vatican. It's in the in the Vatican museums. And particular time, the way it worked, so you had a church, you wanted to name the church after one of the saints. Once the Vatican had statues of all the saints, what they would do is, if they wanted a copy of the Roman statue, they would get permission from the Vatican, and they would hire my family to make a copy of an existing statue, make them all, and that would come back to the United States or wherever the church wanted it, so that they could have, St. Peter's Church had an actual cast of the original St. Peter's statue. Probably not something that St. Peter would stand for, but certainly years later. I mean, that's one of my things when I was working with the Vatican for research. Next, please. Anyway, this is a story that I'm a little worried to say that well, my grandfather built in that worked in the Vatican. It was about the 1870s. That's when the French and the Germans were fighting Franco about some war. And at that time, the Vatican was protected by the French battalion. The French what they did go in doing this piece, making them all and a couple of buckles there. So no cards for what we had. They said, well, we have going to Italy, and we're not in the French going to leave the Papal States. So when they leave, we're going to ask the Austrians to come in. They can't take the Austrians. So I was my great grandmother turned around and heard this and said something to the fact that invites the Austrians in to protect, well, every priest in Rome had a throat slit. And if people are concerned about offending people that, and that's quite offensive. So the Pope basically said, and he banished them out of the United States down to Naples. My grandfather was not from there. He went down to Naples and started working for the museums in Naples. Eventually came back. And this is some of the work he did in Naples. Within Naples, in the general area, the Piazza Reale, there's kind of an original 19th century wall, Roberto Pascali, office stores, whatever. And my grandfather, great grandfather worked on there. He worked on a lot of those were using some of the styles. Because when we call that a lot. Anyway, this is an interesting statue of Naples. That's outside the horse. If you look at these two statues, this is the Valley's horse, is basically, I guess, reasonable people sitting on horse lions. But anyway, we need to look at this. And when he was putting the sculpting piece, he needed models. So he had like great granduncle, and my grandfather as the models for the statue. So when we went visiting the first time over there, the family opened us, we were going to keep stone pots in the building. I ran over and they just, and that was basically this. They showed us what the family, the battalion, and all remained in, and my grandfather came to the United States. A piece that they were the models for, and my grandfather, our great grandfather, Continis. That's what the movie looks like. I think it's a long American. Of course, I'm an American master. There's another family one. After making up on the schedule, the museum wanted a copy of this statue. The other one is a 2nd century BC Persian Greek statue. And what's interesting because there was actually has a movement to it. Other than, portraits, this is like a movement. This is the execution of a priest and his two sons being put to death by a snake. Anyways, Georgia Museum wanted a very significant piece because one of the few animated sculptors of the day. And so they had to make model cast of it. One of the curators would say, so, castings made of plaster, it's plaster cubes, and it's up, and the heat will not destroy the statue. So, you can manipulate light. So that's basically, so my great grandfather, the ghost of the made this copy. I don't know if they ever made the copy. They probably have to go back and find out. And the Georgia Museum is hanging out or something. They've since made copies of it as you go into that in the museum. It's on the ground floor, it's kind of in the back of it. But that's not the family story. We actually did go back and forth. The neighbors back. No, the neighbors go. They got it back after Pope died and everybody forgave everybody. Took hands and then next. Family said that my great grandfather this guy for the Victoriano anyway, supposedly my great grandfather, the was working on it. That's what my grandfather told you in the trade. I helped him work on this. I don't have anything writing about that family or it's a good story. And next, please. Once fair, 1904, they meet the Virginia was again the chancellor for Remington, wrote his nephews in Rome on Naples and said, hey, a lot of work for this really great World's Fair, the St. Louis exposition, and collaterally, the language. So Atilio and Adolfo came over, and they worked on statues for this fair, and then they were really out of the saying, hey, whatever. And all that stuff disappeared. This was fair, it's only a couple of buildings, like those things. Anyway, so that's one of the first exhibitions of Fraser's life, I guess, road size end of the trail. Next, please. Chester French and Eugene. So Eugene, I didn't work with Chester French, and he did make a working on the Lincoln Water. If you go to Stockbridge, you can see the studio in which you work. That piece at Lincoln right there in the middle. That's the actual working model that Eugene made and Chester French. And the sculptors, if it's really what is actually sculpted, they're the ones who use that for measurements. Those statues 3 inches long, so the main thing has got to be 10 inches long. So do all that's on the basis of the arches. Much the same way that that's Borglum, Farnham, they had no modeling to the measures and everything. Anyway, so the team had a good relationship with French. Excellent. There's a couple pieces around. In the archives, French did history, which Virginia worked on. There was a film called National Treasure here that shows up as kind of panned library film. Next, please. French did the 4 Seasons down in Manhattan. The old Hamilton Treasury Building. That was a 4 Seasons. People may have done it because it doesn't. They don't everything depends on what's listed. And he did alma mater at Columbia University. That's an interesting piece, is the happenings. full time. Anyway, well, it's really about it. He was sculpted in their home. Like, there was 5 of them until they became the foremost member of the family. They did, as I said, not only did it home, but they carved other things. And an interesting relationship. This was great. That's Eugene. I left this guy worked around. He got married in 1885. Picture really was, the third picture really was the best man or the witness at his wedding and the say, oh, you accept. Everybody in this game wants something that I had. It's a county boulevard on that's how we get it's Farnham. When I was cleaning out my grandfather's house in Manhattan, we found that piece of the attic. It was a bunch of pieces. And unfortunately, when we found the piece, the horse was. The bus was still there when the house was. I gave this talk at Italian genealogy, so they were reading one time, and I said, and the horse's head was missing. And one of the guys in the Italian genealogy said, well, maybe it's someone's dead. Other than that, so I have that piece amongst all my collections. I have some of them, some of the brown stuff. So I kind of needed to find miniatures of all these. But this is the rough life. This film's going to be about this after this talk. And Proctor made the rough letter. There's a guy with him on the honeymoon home. For the Frederic, this dog wanted to honor him. So he commissioned the statue of Teddy as a rough letter, and they put it in Oregon. This is the piece of the later. The film was made by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 1952. While there's classes in the statue. And that's the only my grandfather. Fortunately, in 1920, the mob decided that they didn't like to take it out anymore. So they tore it down and we got a better monument in outside the History Museum in Portland, Oregon. They took paint on it. And I didn't understand people's contacts and stuff. But somebody whose family was involved with this, it was a hard type of thing. And I think they cleaned the statue up and got it in the store somewhere. But it's just shame that artists is too late like this. What do I? It says Governor FREDTalks, Sculptor, FREDTalks got the permission to do the random water, which is why I have. Grants over this is FREDTalks asking my talking about just like I guess my grandfather writing FREDTalks. I said he's going to do this memorial, which is the largest question statue in the United States, bronze statue. Which got the Indian. And that's the grandma one. A piece, it's got 2 side pieces, the calibrated artillery, and Ray was not appreciated by his fellow sculptors. He was a very young sculptor at the time. And they say that Dan Burns was kind of upset at non is right word, but he wasn't play. And he basically got a connection to this thing. He was happy that that's an established sculptor in the edit. It's a nice piece. Anyway, that's close up to grade. Or basically, said about was that a 3D made piece Continis couldn't cast it, it's complicated. But my grandpa had skill making something at home. The moment joined in the gut pieces, the cast statue, make the bolts. It's a 3D studio. So he also did one of the concrete station at the Westchester Boston Railroad, which turned out the number we wanted to go from Westchester to Boston. So, built all these statues and all these stations, kind of died off after 10 years. Next, please. This is a letter from Bonds, my grandfather, and Brady wanted a castmate of his piece called Washington, which is in Williams, which was it. I try as well as possible. It's actually a sense and fitness. Next, please. Anyway, that's that statue of Washington about voicing towards Redmond cast that for Strady. And then they made a copy of it for Kansas City, Missouri. Cast the flying figure of the short memorial. Next, please. Anyway, if you've been in Boston, in the Common, the short memorial is this 55-inch tree cut at that white man slow. Man did. This piece. This is I skated when I was grandpa in 1925. Grandpa, his grandpa. So, make balls. Yes. It's not an exhibition. Static, Spanish, and chips. Let's cast my grandpa. That's it. So, it's it's alignment. It goes up the leaves. Stops. And that's what it looks like. See, I it's to us. These two stacks is going into the Borglum parkway. Wrap up with this. We're saying, and David, next please. That's Jefferson. I think it's a Jeff, that's a grandpa on Jefferson. But I would so two things happen. One is
couldn't, it would, although that's parts and several example of mental change. Just dedication. And that plaster was not replaced until 1947. Next, please. And this is, you can see how tall the Jefferson is. On the left-hand side is my uncle. On the left-hand side of grandpa, I'm sorry. On the right-hand side of grandpa Bowser. Grandpa was kind of old at that time, so the sculptor petitioned, actually, Roosevelt's level, to have grandpa, my uncle Bowser, help him. Bowser was stationed at Fort Belvoir. So my uncle was given special leave to help grandpa make the mold and cast of the Jefferson Memorial. This is the taking part of the class. You can see the white underneath over here, where it was, and they separated whatever it is. The actual statue, the town statue, was cast all in one piece. Next, please. Richard Recchia was interested in Richard. He was commissioned to do the General Store Memorial in Chester, New Hampshire. So he wrote a letter to grandpa to make the mold cast. So this is it. And then one of the things that it says, and I pledge a flag floats over the yonder hill, Molly Stark sleeps a widow. So basically he says that if we don't take him, our wife's going to. Next please. There was a woman, Betchen was in love with Martha Busta. She basically owned the business. Grandpa didn't think sculptors financially stable. This is the Fraser's statue at going at the Rockland Parkway. And that statue started out in 1928. And they argued over bronze, plastic, carved stone, whatever, and ended up being painted, gilded stone. But anyway, they between all the arguments, and then what ended up happening. The next place, they didn't get around to it until after the end of the war. And one of the problems was that my grandpa was, I can't do this thing because all my kids are in the army. And so the author of this letter says, I'm glad. Please learn from your letter of November 6th that the Contini boys are back from the war and are now working to cast a question. The whole sculpture in the war. Anyway, next. To show the movie. Yeah, that's the Franklin Institute, and also the National. Well, Peter in it. Anyway, that's the statue of Jefferson that Fraser did. But that's it. Franklin. And this is they did Fraser family work pretty much. Fraser pretty much exclusively use our family. Next. This one is gone now too. If you've been in New York at the Natural History Museum, people have been by Roosevelt riding a horse, Native American. So, walking beside Roosevelt, and so I took that statue down. It's in storage, I think, or it's either in storage or it went up to Fraser's birthplace up in Minnesota. And then there's Fraser working. Again, it's one of those things we feel like it's got to work up. It's like somebody else. Anyway, Next, please. End of the trail. This is what I said. This is the when the end of the trail went into the mud outside of San Francisco after 1915 Pacific Exposition. The National Capital Hall of Fame in Oklahoma wanted it as the original piece. So they made a deal with the town that actually eventually bought it and sold it. And they said, okay, we'll take the plaster, shape, and we'll give you a bronze and replacement. What had happened was the plaster was put on a pedestal in this town, and it just every once in a while painted it. So, yeah, plaster being painted every once in a while. It survived very long, and this is probably 50 years or whatever after, so it was in pretty bad shape. So my Uncle Cesare over here was doing the restoration and the Fraser, and this is what it looks like. It's their centerpiece at the National Capital thing, and they have a fairly large Fraser collection. And I actually have some stuff in their archives. So you can research it or archives. It's continued. Next, please. This is more Fraser pieces. He did the Gallatin, Hamilton, and Hamilton. Those are Treasury, the Secretary of the Treasury that stand outside the Treasury building. And at West Point, George Patton, my father actually worked on George Patton. He stepped on the toe, so if you read over there, so he did the cast, his foot is a little flatter. And what he else is then supposedly his binoculars would be. There's no different angles. But the Italian phrase, watch the cat. Anyway, next please. These are some other pieces that they did. Again, as I said, once Fraser hired the Contini, basically. That's why you see all these pieces. But anyway, you drive and you can find something. Next, please. Pennsylvania Railroad Museum. This is the railroad station. This is their Pennsylvania Railroad monument to the people who died in World War II. And this is the family standing around the cast of it. That's my father. That's my grandfather. That's Uncle Cesare. This guy was a guy by the name of Rockabansky, and he was what they call the pointer. The pointer is the guy who takes the little statue, puts a point on it, and it's like a pentagram that enlarges it. So he puts a little point on what Hancock worked on, and he enlarges it. And when we show you the movie, you'll see how that's done. But anyway, the problem with this piece is it's way up in the air and nobody ever sees it. And so I went to the station looking for it and find it. Looked up and there it was. Angel holding it, soldier. Next, please. This is the Marine Corps War Memorial. This is what it's actually called, but so everybody refers to it as the UG Memorial. Grandpa did that for Felix, and I think he did another one that's at West Point, but I know this is. So he did it pretty well. The Weldon actually died as a pauper because his son was involved in a lot of legal issues, and Felix spent a lot of time bailing for the jail. So by the time he died, it was pretty much poverty stricken. Next, please. This is, I remember I mentioned that's Christian Anderson in Central Park. You can actually see how shiny the top of the book is when people's little kids' butts used to be. And sitting on his knee and then sitting on they had to, this is a repouring of the duck because people would cut it off. They would cut it off and steal the ducks. They always had a place to go. We were sitting just like everybody else. I used to live in that as a kid. We always go there. And there's a grandpa working on the cast of the. That's my father helping there. Next, please. That says George Lover. Lover did two pieces. He did a bunch of pieces, but the ones that are most famous is we have Times Square, 45th Street, so Times Square. But he did the George Cohen statue, and then out in Morristown, New Jersey, he did the Thomas Paine statue. Next. Anna Huntington did the near us where I live, down near Poughkeepsie, New York. She did the Civil Ludington statue. And that's right in the park. You have to kind of look for it. It's in the park in Farnham, New York. Next, please. This is a statue of Israel Putnam, one of the Revolutionary War generals, and he's raising his fist. That's my Uncle Cesare working on the cast in the studio in New York. I found a picture. I found this picture. And I'm looking at this guy going down steps. And the first impression I got is here's this guy going to hell. And it's going steps, making his fist. I thought, well, here's this guy made a cut. Well, years later, a friend of ours lived in Connecticut, took us around and has a statue of George Putnam. I mean, Israel Putnam. And really what it is when he was escaping from the British and he was raising his, with that bunch of places, escaped the British, and he was actually raising his fist to the British, which was a little more acceptable to God, I'm sure. Anyway, next, please. Huntington did a couple of pieces. This is in the same place where Sally James Farnham's statue of Simon Boulevard at the top of 6th Avenue in New York City. New York, that's 6th Avenue is actually known as the Avenue of Americas. And in this little piazza above where 6th Avenue ends, there are three South American heroes. Simon Boulevard, was it? Guy name was St. Martin. And then in the 60s, like Tilio, Cesare and his brothers made the cast of mold for his Jose Marti. The problem with that one was it was made in like 1961, 62. We were in front of Cuba. So the hero of the Cuban Revolution went to storage until everybody told him that Castro. And so you ended up putting the Marti. That's it. In the Americas, and this is supposedly he was the way he's positioned there. That's when he was caught and bullet him. He was killed him. So, and I don't think she was there. This took a bullet. And then this is at the Spanish Society, and that's Don Quixote. Spanish Society on 55th Street in New York. You really, when you get look at the sculpture, kind of everywhere, looking for these things. That's kind of actually in Harlem, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, next please. They made a sculptor by the name of Vino Maka was commissioned to make a memorial to the people who lost, soldiers, sailors, etc., lost their lives in the Battle of the Atlantic off the American coast. And so he made this flying eagle, actually, ocean, and that's the wave he was landing on. And the statue was dedicated by John Kennedy, May 23, and he would be dead 6 months later. Anyway, that's my Uncle Cesare and his wife, Vera, who's they went in India to go to war. She was a driver for the Indian Army. Next, please. And this is the 1964 World's Fair in New York City. This is Final Duluth statue called the Rocket Thrower. And if you follow the little rules, basically have one figure, looks like they have an action figure that holds different ways. So if you look at these pieces, they're all kind of the same, except for the ones with the But anyway, this is the Rocket Thrower, this is when they really started the space race. So he made this for the World's Fair in Cesare and Borglum. Next, please. And anyway, so you can see how close they were. The sculptor's writing my Uncle Horacio. Thank you for working. Horacio was actually, he didn't work as much. He was more of a contractor. He started a lot of old buildings in Wilson County. Next, please. This is what the Ratchet cast all by himself. It's in the Convention Center in Boston. And he did this in the Farnham Lodge in Ulster County, New York. And that's how it ended up. He did that. Tether was busy in something else, so Ratchet did the whole piece for Google. Next, please. And this is the spirit of organism rising from the waves at the Colville Cemetery in Normandy. I don't have it. I've been looking for the blues papers in every archive I can find. I get from these papers. The family did all of Deleuze's casting, but I don't have anything writing that he did this statue. I don't know if he did it or not, but he did a lot of it as well. But this is the centerpiece of the American Cemetery at Normandy in Colville. Again, you can see basically just moving off now. It was a good story. You can see the theme. Next, please. He built down in Washington. Deleuze did the Boy Scout Memorial right outside in the ellipse by the White House. They were kind of upset when they did it because you have naked people. And we got to put something. Anyway, they were kind of upset that he made a naked guy leading the boy around, which is it's not a good thing for the image of the Boy Scouts, but that's Deleuze's vision. Next, please. And this is Washington Prayer in Valley Forge. And this is at the Heritage Foundation. And that's Cesare work. You can see that foot over there. And he's working on the mold, the cast actually. Whatever. And we went down to find, it was kind of hard to find because it was on private property. But Deleuze did a lot of work. This sculptor was very involved in technical details. So, watching it, you see every single bone. He made everybody kind of muscular. Next, please. Down at the Louisiana Memorial at Gettysburg, and this is again, you can see his allegorical figure. And there's a dead Confederate soldier and the allegorical angel leading up to heaven. It's interesting pieces. It's along the road where the Southern Army was waiting to go across for its charge. So you don't walk over this piece. And then change it, please. And this is the other one that's there is the Mississippi Memorial. That's the guy actually kind of swinging his rifle around. It's called Late on the Afternoon. That's what it represents late on in the afternoon of 1860, July 3rd, 1863. So that's basically after Pickett's charge. I think the look after. Next piece. And this is, again, the artists and the casters and craftsmen are all very tight group of people. And here's Phil Remington, right? Cesare and his wife said, via Christmas time. So there was between the picture movie brothers witnessing like Virginia's wedding in 1895. The Lou talking about this. There are other pieces around it. Day-long presentation, which it almost is. Anyway, next piece. This is a beautiful piece. Frederic is the guy who did the three soldiers and the soldiers, looking at the names. And I met him when I was picking up. My contribution was I was right. Like we were picking up the pieces with 1/3 large and 1 wide that was going to end up being enlarged into the piece at the National Hall of Fame. I was down in the studio and I actually saw Frederic's piece in what they call plastinated clay. And this is one of the most beautiful pieces I've ever seen. It's basically creation, and as you can see, it's kind of like a swirling operation here. Adam is in the middle of some plants and animals, everything's swimming around. It's called Ex Nihilo, out of nothingness. So there was three pieces of the porticos at the National Cathedral. And this is the creation day. This is out of nothing. and this was the creation of night. By the time Frederic was making it, my uncle pretty much 9 years. Part of wanted them to be part of this project, but it was making the cast on a big piece, which if you go look at the church, it's fairly big. You know, I don't think I wouldn't recommend you go back to work. So they got to do the creation of night. Next, please. And asked Uncle Cesare and my father working on the creation of night. And while I was in the studio picking up pieces of the Contini, Bart asked Cesare if he would do these two pieces of Peter and Paul as well. That they were also they're in between the doors on the National Theater. So if you look at the go down there. Anyway, next please. Stanley Blyfeld, I mentioned a little earlier. This is the statue of the home sailors outside the Navy Memorial in Washington, D.C. This is one of the Cesare doing. This you'll see this later on. The way you make a piece mold is you take the soft clay or whatever, and you put thin grass strips in the way you want them, and then when you put the plaster around, that's it. Okay, so there's Caesar putting in the grass strips. There's an artist who's put it in the wrong place. It didn't work very well. So there's Caesar putting in the grass strips to make the mold. There's my father watching, make sure he does it right, I guess. And then they put the bluing on it so they could tell the difference between the actual statue and the mold. And that's Dad helping and Caesar Cesare putting the bluing on the statue so they have the color separation. Next, please. I did an interview with Father. Anyway, this is what I mentioned earlier about the complicated molds. And Stanley asked Cesare, he was concerned about his work, and Uncle Cesare said, La Manza Sapenza. And Stanley said, that would ring in my ears. I feel the blows that I have to strike cast or anything. All his work. So anyway, he wrote this up in forward of a book of himself. Anyway, it's interesting. It's La Manza Sapenza. It doesn't fit, it's just like. Next, please. This is one of the last pieces they worked on. Cesare worked on this. It's for a sculptor by the name of Marion Scuola, and she did this piece at a children's family services. Is a Catholic nun with a boy that was part of the program. And this is Cesare in the studio in New York City working on it. You can see he's putting the shims to make the mold on it. Next, please. All right, this is a little bit of family history. Eugenio Contini, 1859. He was in the Italian military in the 19th century. He was in the 24th Regiment. This was got into genealogy. I got this information because I do an ego search. eBay. Anytime something with the Contini name shows up, eBay sends me notice it's something offered with the Contini. Most of it is some Contini hockey player. Also, I find in 2021, I was on a cruise on the Columbia River in Washington, and just emails, and eBay had online collection of papers and documents. Eugenio Contini, some letters he written with the translator, was a lady, and anyway, I found a whole bunch of things about Eugenio. Again, Eugenio was a guy who did Remington's casting. I found out that he came to the United States on the USS Alaska in 1891, a whole bunch of things. But that's eBay. So, geological, now I got it. You're saying geological. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so he was doing, you can use eBay if your name is Max. Do some family research. Later on, Tony offered 300 postcards that my grandfather wrote to his children on the road to work with sculptors. And then before that, I found letters that were written by him to Daniel Chester French about some of the pieces French pointed cast. Next, please. This is Eugenio's son, Angelo. Angelo hated the business. He worked with his father on occasion, but after his father was dead, he moved out to Los Angeles and made models for the film industry. So one of the films he worked on is he made a lot of the models and stuff that was in The Wizard of Oz. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. He's only a pattern.
Is your grandfather? Is your grandfather?
No, this is he would be temporary of my grandfather in terms of age. Okay, so it would be Eugenio was my great grandfather's contemporary, and then his son would be my grandfather's, and then his son who worked in the film industry as well, had a camera operator. And he did it, but he didn't like the business cast. Next, please. Adolfo Contini was one of the people that Eugenio invited over for the 1904 exposition. His father, Ettore, may have worked in the Research Museum in the Via Borghese and north of Rome that shows a guy by the name of Canonica's work. And Canonica had Greek political figures, Arabian political, Russian political figures. So Ettore may have been the guy who did work in Greece, or he may have taken something. But I tell you what, Adolfo was a guy who came to America to make money on the St. Louis Fair. He also stayed. He tried to start a foundry of his own for French, but he never made it. He continued to work for the foundries. Next, please.
So was it Adolfo and Eugenio who would have worked on the large plaster piece for the 1904?
Adolfo came over.
Oh, I thought it said 02.
Which piece you talking about?
The Remington sculpture that was enlarged in plaster.
I think they came over for the
That was, there was a piece in the fair in 19.
I don't know. Part of it is
We're having trouble finding
anything that mentions it. Well, I sometimes I have to find something in writing. Like I've been searching for Duluth's papers for years. I don't know where his papers are stored. I think they're in a subsidiary of the Smithsonian down in Washington. Then you got to go down there, and you got to go and look at documents. Anyway, here's my grandfather. Silvio came over in 1904 at the request of Eugenio, and he liked it so much he stayed. He initially worked for the Roman Bronze Works, which is Remington, at the subcast. And then he pulled away from the foundry. He became the middleman, contracted middleman. So the sculptors specifically go after him to do casting and mold making, and he became an industry in his own. Now it's converted back to the foundries. The immigrants who work there now, from whatever nations they're coming from, they're basically employed with the foundry, and nobody knows them. Our sculptors. But anyway. He died in 1960 while expecting out a job in Indianapolis. Next, please. His oldest son, Cesare Augusto Continis, is a picture of this. All the sons came back from World War II. Grandpa put them all, sat them all around these pictures. And that's Cesare in his uniform. And then a sculptor by the name of Lutke made this bust. And it was lost in the war, but he used that anymore. Would have been nice to have it. And it was luckily expensive. It looks a lot like it. So next, please. Horatio, he helped out occasionally because he was kind of freelancing, contractor building, but he was doing restorations and whatever, building houses. He was an Army combat engineer, building roads and everything. austere, rebuilding roads, no damage to his unit. And he died in 96. Nice, he's one of my favorite uncles. Next, please. Neil Contini, he also beautiful. He never, he one day told me that he would work a good time with, but grandpa expected him like a surgery with a doctor. You know, the doctor puts out his hand, and grandpa expected whoever was helping him the right tool in that hand. And Neil was like, and if they put it in writing, he would have been able to do it, but just putting your hand out doesn't make it. So he ended up being after the war. He stayed in the reserves after the war, and he ended up going after duty, joining the war. And interesting, he's blind as a bat and afraid of flying. So when he joined up in World War II, they made him a photographer, which went along with blind as a bat. And then he was afraid of flying, so he went to the airport. You can see where the army works. Anyway, next one, please. Rodeo, he didn't work that much. He was a farmer mostly. He helped out occasionally. He was the one that helped out the Jose Market down in Piazza, South American Heroes Piazza. Next, please. That's my father, dad. He was the highest ranking of the sons coming out. Too. He was a senior sergeant medical unit. And in October, we're going to go to France, and we're going to dedicate a monument to his cavalry, the 121st Cavalry Guns Squadron. I'm going to do a talk. I can have more subject. And my son's going to play, he's a military bandsman, going to play taps, and we're going to ride in World War II military vehicles along the same path that my father's unit took after they liberated the Croat forts. So, but he worked with Anilo and training for a while, and then eventually got a nice job with Republic Aviation and Long Island, and he made patterns for the 105, the F-105, which was the primary fighter war in Vietnam. He also made patterns for the A-10, which is now going out of service. The pilots don't want to go out of service. The Republic made planes that protected pilots a lot. And the Air Force, once they used their F-35 instead of the A-10, so the A-10 finally went out of service. And then towards the end, he did work. They got a subcontractor to work on the tail of the Apollo, the space shuttle. He was, that's his military photo after the war. His unit got the, you see, it was a piece of it, but his unit got the French Croix de Guerre, and he was awarded the Bronze Stone. And then he got the ruptured duck. Anybody know what the ruptured duck is? That's what they put in the uniform to show that you're no longer in the military. Because when they came back from the war, they didn't have the clothes. So they were walking for months after the war, when they came back to the war, uniform. And they had to sew on this patch. It was an eagle, but it looked like a ruptured duck. So anybody who knows anything about it, so that's ruptured duck. So he had to wear the ruptured duck while he was flying. So, next, please. James, he joined the Army. Actually, my father was the only one, so everybody else joined in 1942. So James joined, I think, 43. He was the one who was painting the last patina on Jefferson. He's the only one who went to college, and he became a chemist in Hercules powder mill that made explosives, and also fluid around. But he was one of the nicest uncles in terms of just a very friendly guy. Next, please. Sixth generation. Cousins. By the time I was born in 50, which makes me a really old guy. And most of them. Not bad. Claiming older. Come here for competition. Anyway, bottom line is 1950, after the war, they started doing modern art, figurative sculpture. So with the time frame when we would have been interns or whatever you would call them, there just wasn't a lot of work to be done. And that's what Chesbury was doing in the state of business. Everybody else had to go somewhere to something else. When they occasionally came back, the Chesbury was the backbone of the continuation of the business. And so none of us went in. So I spent my life getting master's degrees so I could spell Barnes and Poppins. My older brother went to the nuclear Navy and was recruited by Westinghouse to go out and be an operator of the plant out in Hanford, Washington. My younger brother is involved in contracting, sales, building stuff. My sister is a certified managing person. She's the head certified accountant for the housing company that's headquartered in Westchester County. Other cousins said that they tried to work with my Uncle Chesbury, but they just never could get along. They're just two different generations. I guess some of them had the same problem where Chesbury would hand out an arm expected my thing to show up. So none of us actually got involved in physics. When I got mail, he had my papers. And as well, he said in his will that all my papers go to Alex because Alex will know what to do with them. Assuming he thought I wasn't going to throw garbage. And that's another problem. Is that a lot of sculptors, when their descendants got involved, they would see molds and things. And we actually, when we cleaned out my grandfather's Walton Chesbury's house, we had to post up photographs of the dumpster because the people who were cleaning the house had no interest in family. And some of the stuff that actually came like this piece up here came out of our going in and trying to rescue Fraser's descendants were throwing his molds and stuff into dumpsters. And Stanley Blackfeld, lived nearby, found out about it. He got in court injunction to stop that. And all the hit molds and papers and everything. Fraser, who's passive presence of our public art, the papers were picked up and the pieces of sculpture were picked up by the Bird Museum in Syracuse University. So you almost, stand up and run out of time. Because generations don't care. As far as they were concerned, what's the last or what do you want all things? Well, even if it's an invoice, it says what they worked on, when they worked on. So every piece of scrap of paper is important research. So we rescued some stuff over the years, but ultimately the sixth generation, we didn't get involved. I'm the closest to it because I didn't talk. I think my contribution, although I wasn't an artist, family, my contributions, hopefully that's type and brag. Next, do I have next? Future research. There's a guy in Contini in Rome who did casting for years of sugar bowl, cast silver sugar bowl. Same process. It's possible that he may. I've been trying to track him down differently. Being Italy, trying to track him down. There is a Contini who works for an arms factory over there who makes molds, parts, weapons. So he may be part of it because it's the same process. He may very well be somewhere in the family tree. I don't know. Next, please. This is too much to read, but anyway, I don't know. We went to just keep it. One of my cousins in the room said, when will it be done? When will the research done? I said, well, I got to go back to having leave. And so, and you guys keep having babies. So I'm working both ends of this thing. And we new babies coming up. And, we keep it out. If I find stuff out, I go to every time I go to Rome to visit, I stop in someplace, do some research. I've done a lot of research in St. John Lateran Cathedral. That's actually Bishop's Seat from Rome. And they have tremendous art. I found a lot of stuff now. I found my grandfather's birth record there. And the priest who wrote out the record, it's not the certificates, but it's generally useless. the record was important. And this guy listed everybody who was involved, uncles, aunts, and those witnessing. But he even listed the doctor who delivered my grandfather. So I mean, it was a detailed, the priest was really detailed on everybody. And that also led me to finding the house, you know, where they live. So I mean, it's an ongoing process with the genealogy, you know, it's an ongoing process. It's a frustrating process. Angelo, I found Angelo in Utah. I found the Mormon families, and I found a piece of reference to Angelo, who's the second generation. I found a piece that referred to his, told me the location of Angelo's death certificate. That was birth certificate, I'm sorry. And so it'd be great. The birth certificate's going to tell me who his father was, his mother was, all this information. So I went to the piece of film and went looking, and my Angelo's record was like 1403, and whoever's taking pictures of the records stopped at like 1400. Yeah, so there was no more. That was it. That was my shot. To this point, I'm finding out about Angelo's father, the first generation. You know, that's the type of thing we can bang your head against the screen. Next, please. And thank you for your interest and attention. We're going to show you the film and then answer the questions about answering the questions a lot. Especially. You want to take a couple minutes break? You want to go ahead?
There's one more slide here. I don't know.
No, that's don't worry about it.
Can I repeat a question? I actually have a question for Michael Reed, who's going to virtually.
Okay.
I don't want to forget. Oh, there we go. I don't know if you could hear us much, but I have it written and I'll read it. He says, the Metropolitan Museum of Art has recently begun recognizing the collaborative work by the, is it the Piccadilly? Piccadilly, sorry. By including them on labels as a way of telling a more comprehensive historical narrative, acknowledging their work besides the primary sculptor. And I love this question. There's follow-up, but I love thinking about sculptures as not just a single artist's work, but really a collaborative process. But he says, would you like to see your family's name added beside primary sculptors to reflect their contribution to the country's most enduring monuments?
Yeah, it'd be fine. What should I say? No. Now you have a rhetorical question. Yeah, I think a friend of mine who was a sculptor in Poughkeepsie, New York, told me about a piece that one of the brothers, his brothers made that's in a Italian parish, city of Poughkeepsie, and the parish building is rented by a group that works with special needs kids, but they put up a gigantic bulletin board in front of this Piccadilly sculpture. And this Piccadilly, this guy, this Piccadilly son, brother, his wife worked and taught at Vassar College. You know, so I've been trying to get into this place, but they're not happy about me wanting to pull this bulletin board down and look at this piece. So we've been working to try to get this piece removed. But I think we'll take the whole wall and nobody's interested in the whole. Yes, the answer is yes. Anything I can do to spread the family word. Thank you. Anybody else? All right, so if you don't have to use the restroom, we'll go to the film.
Sure.
Okay, if you use the restaurant, it's only one, two, still good. Hey, ready to go? Go to 7. Oh, that was a long time. That's still super. Want to get up and stretch?
Yeah.
All right, the Dominican bronze statue made in 1922-ish by Metropolitan Museum.
Is this on YouTube at all?
Hmm?
Is this on YouTube?
No, it's museum doesn't need the place to have it. So it's in the basement. No sound. It was made in 1922 before sound. So this takes it from the beginning, the concept, the paper conception of the piece, all the way to the end. And this is the statue that was taken out of mob. 100 years later. I'll let you read. Interrupt me.
Sculpture in that part?
So again,
Is it sculpture in that part?
no, they called him a pointer.
Okay.
There's a guy who would take his machine,
Right.
basically. One small piece, what he's making now, he's making the framework that he's going to use to put, see how he's putting the blast on it. So this is how he got the heroic size. By building that framework and putting the blast on it.
This is what your grandfather did, his part?
No, my grandfather didn't do the pointing. He did, he worked on this piece after the sculptor came back to complete fine detail. But he would have done the small piece
Small piece, okay.
that they used to take the large piece. So this is the step after grandpa. And everywhere he made a point, he's putting in a nail to show the depth at which the plastic should be.
So that was a wooden frame underneath the
Yeah.
plaster.
When the sculptor goes back, that's fine. Throw the stuff at it and get a picture. There's the just makes it rough. He'll put plaster. He'll put clay back on top of plaster. You establish the details. Clay.
Your grandfather did his part to go for it.
Put it. separate space. Some of those pieces will be keys and stuff. Number one is they don't touch very soft clay, but pressing stuff against it. The other part of it is when you throw it at it, so the air gets out. So the kids hated the sons hated it. All they got to do is mix classroom. The other thing they hated was my pop's in short Italian. The other thing they hate is that once they made the mold, somebody had to come along and pull that clay out of it. The youngest member of the family would be the guy who got the job of pulling the clay out of the mold. So but this process, the original was destroyed, so the mold wasn't made properly. That's all this work. False. But
Was it a small thing and then the big thing? Usually all
whatever was
in 2 stages.
Yeah, he would make the mold and cast small, the primary piece of the guy worked out.
Right.
And then the pointer would come along, use that cast to make it larger. And then he would make, usually when it's a growing piece, he'd make it 1/3 larger. So he'd make the cast on the mold on it, not 1/3 larger, make that into a cast, pointer would come back and make it. A roll gets bigger than full size.
So those little pieces that he made, small pieces, would those be in some kind of museum?
So,
The small, stage 1, he did the small pieces. Would those be
Yeah, yeah.
someplace?
that's
Would they be somewhere?
probably a couple of sculptors got possessive, they
Oh,
destroyed it. A lot of times people would take them, like the foundries sometimes, if they weren't very reputable, would make copies, unauthorized copies. And stuff. So as soon as the mold was done, they needed like destroy the mold. That's why there's not a lot of them. And that's why I was very lucky. And some of them were in my grandfather's house in Europe.
okay.
So here's the rough liner that would.
What are we looking at there? What
They're just showing the final cast.
final cast?
This now I think this is all being apart based on the joints that they made. Actually, you can see it a little bit in the film, but you can also see it in the David Platt slab. See the same thing. There were different angles of attacking light. Yes, it's hollow.
Still pretty good.
I found it was really 10 and thick bolts. Faster and iron bars. Now get some boundary. When it's being moved. What's his head?
Is this in New York City?
Yeah.
Oh, are they going to Roman Broadsworth?
Yeah.
Sweet.
They're taking it and put it in that guy's bed.
Yeah.
This was transferred from film, from Turkey, long old film to video, so we can process any necessary capture. Details on it, so. Process.
Wax on, right?
This process is the same process used in the Roman days. So it's a very old thing. It hasn't changed until the 80s and 90s when we started using latexes. The latex mold stretched a little bit, so you really didn't get the detail. That was my uncle started working with latex. That was just before he passed away. That's a rough outside of a mold. And it's heated up, the gelatin melt away. The mold for the bronze is mold made by different people. This is made with materials that survive the heat.
So what are they pulling off it right now?
Yeah.
That's the gelatin they talked about a little bit earlier.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't all dissolve away, it doesn't all.
Well, they haven't done it.
Oh, okay.
This is going to be what's going to be used to make the mold that the foundry will pour the ones. You know, you look at the process and you say, well, a couple steps I could have skipped. Yes. A lot of it had to do with how resilient the plaster. So they put tubes of pipe to release the lines.
And your grandfather wouldn't do this part.
No, he was just as he was the actual. This is the mold being made of fireproof materials, probably asbestos.
Oh,
And these guys were having it from strong. One of the things had to do with the fact bombs could explode or lead could explode, so they had to protect the environment. So actually, the previous one was melting gelatin out of the mold. that mold is made by body of real mold statue. That mold is now put in a pit with the 7 bronze. Some of these components of World War II are in the Netherlands, but that's true. So that's something. Well, it's the forms of kids. They did the same ships that they made full mold.
But it's one piece, yeah.
It's the force.
Yes.
Seal the pipes coming off where the expansion of lines was. Then they're cutting off the expansion. Probably gonna reuse that. Standing over an acid pit. That ocean- that ocean that filled that. Same. See what he's wording, it's the same thing. I showed you. Key that's put together. All the dimples were made with a bolting hammer into the shims that they placed. Most of this work. It's pronounced the guy who found it on by us, Mr. His name.
Ricardo Bertelli.
That's it. Or something
Yeah.
people do. I read it in a book when I was talk to the guy. You had I'm sure you have Samuel's Earl Samuel's book here. He's one of the biography.
Oh, Harold Samuels.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to Harold. That's information about another piece, and he said he donated all of those papers and piece to the Cody Museum in Wyoming. So we have the Cody Museum in Wyoming, and they said, "Yeah, we haven't had a chance to index it. It's just all the boxes." So that was like 30 years ago, so I decided to go back and see if we indexed it. All this research is soldering the joints with the original plastic, having reason about it. There's a film, you can go to performance in the academia, where David is located. In fact, one of the rooms outside of the David is your shop / bunch of the pieces, large pieces with a little nail action. Anyway, they want to fill all of them just with a narration. I asked them to buy a copy of that. They got it, but I've been there a couple of times. Something cheap. I can see it. Nice. Let's see. This thing went by boat. So anyway, I didn't know where it was, exactly where it was. So I tried to think, who should I call like Portland? They asked, where the statue is. I'm thinking, what? I said, here are the historical society. So I called the historical society and get a receptionist. I said, well, we're looking for a statue. Who's the proprietor? I don't know where it is. Pictures for them. So the woman's standing in, well, we went there physically last. So she's standing in the reception area and looking at the floor. I have no idea what she's talking about. Statue, it's right outside the temple. The reception is looking at it. But one of the nice things, it's also with some of the invitation, is that you get in person, nice tour of the facility, whatever. Well, we're at the chemical thing. They have a magazine. It should have been a nice article. She screwed up names. I gave it correctly. Talk about how grandpa got there. She got it. She said, best. So the article, the nice article, so I wrote a lot of this. It's nice to have the article. Anyway, that's my presentation. This is a working model of a coin. It's called Mario Bell. You can see the spots there. What he did it was to make this coin. Anyway, so this one that he's called to work on. Then they reduce it to that coin. That coin was made for the Czechoslovakian freedom movement prior to 1939. They were going to sold in America to raise funds for the refugees in Czechoslovakia. You can come up with it close if you want.
So basically, that's that we just saw, and reversing from the big to the little. From it's the reverse of this, taking it from a little model.
Yeah.
Big one.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it basically, the sculptor would never all of that thing, so you have to make it big. Then you work both ways.
Right.
This here is maybe Crockett's leg. I got rid of it because it's shows one of the things I have. But what it is this is for a Remington that was supposed to be, was commissioned to sculpt by Daniel DeLue. Donald, and the sculptor was basically Crockett, Bowie, and Travis fighting at the Alamo. Well, there's like, I was telling them earlier, so many constituents, the daughters of the Alamo, the sons of the Alamo, the daughter of the Alamo, whatever, all these constituents. And some of the people didn't want the statue to go inside, public announced it. You make the sculpture, that's got the outside. Other people said, no, we want it inside this plan. So they never got it. You know, so I ended up, I was cleaning out my studio, and the only thing I could find left over was David Crockett's. I saw the original pictures of the original, so I noticed it's David Crockett's leg. You know, but anyway, that's all it's like. The sculpture piece was never made, and Donald DeLue passed away in 1986. There's another thing over here. There's all actually all kinds of things. And did all the pieces, all these pieces go to story is, that's what this is the act. It's about Cesare, it's probably like 15, 16 at age group. He wanted to prove that his father, prove to his father, that he could enter the business of such a work. So he made a mold of his hand to show his father that he was actually ready to enter the business. I think this is the mold. You can see these are all the pieces because we're putting together the label, each finger string. These are all the pieces that Cesare put together with shims and separated to show that his father that he can actually do this, enter the business. And I'm going to talk about little dimples. These little dimples were made. So they were key when they started going back together again, which is my only salvation in trying to get this back together. But I was taking out of the box. Any other questions?
So your grandfather in Rome learned from someone else.
Yes, his father. So my grandfather learned from his father, learned from his father. Augusto learned from his father, Manship.
So your great grandfather, how old were they when they first started to learn to do this? Just boys?
That's when they made the mold in their hand. I don't know, I really don't
And
know.
it just was a process where they apprenticed other people,
Yeah,
and eventually they got to be
They
real.
were, they probably worked with them. I'm making this a craft. I'm glorifying the craft a little bit. Most people don't consider this anything. Doing this work is anything important. Some sculptors have written in their have had written in biographies about the Contini family's work. I mentioned most sculptors, they didn't care because we Contini's own craftsmen or laborers in this case. So they weren't anybody that merited recognition. My uncle Neil, when he gave me all the papers, his plan was that somebody was going to talk about it a little bit, and that's why behind every sculpture, they work with just about every sculptor of the 20th century in America. There's dozens of them that they work with, and so if it wasn't for this stage of the game, a lot of those statues wouldn't have come in significant. They couldn't have worked large sizes. So my job is to talk about the legacy and give people an idea how it was done. And then I also encourage people to do their own research for their own business.
Thank you very much for the really informative presentation.
what you're holding, is that part of a mold into which the wax would have gone?
It would have been whatever. I think he just made the mold. I don't think he
Is because one of the things that we tell visitors here is that when Eva Remington died, when she requested what was in her collection to the library, she stipulated that any mold that existed for any sculptures that were not in her collection, that they should be cast and added to this collection. So I've always just sort of wondered, you know, where were those molds just kept at Roman bronze works? Would they have looked just like that? How many casts could you get from a mold?
Roman bronze and fire and lost a lot of the papers and stuff. Some of the molds would have been that. During earlier, actually probably 1980s, Roman bronze started making plates, primarily the Remington stuff. Plates, display plates that have the Coming to the Ride, a Bronco Buster. The Trooper was one of them. Out there, Roman bronze now, so money off of before they went out of business. But a lot of this, when Fraser did his pieces, and he got burned because he never copyrighted it. He actually destroyed a lot of his pieces afterwards. Did a cast for the Unity line at Pennsylvania University. Ascot, and they were told to destroy it because they were going to make an extra copy in case somebody came along and destroyed the thing that's on campus. So they made a copy of it. But once that was done, they destroyed the mold.
Well, I guess it stipulated that the mold should be destroyed after they made the casts for this collection. But according to the story, Roman Bronze Works made additional casts beyond what she said.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on if they did it on the slide, it depends on what copyright is involved. Who knows? If there's no legal reason not to have done it other than the Lord of the Sculptor, make copies and sell them. I mean, there's a lot of. Well, I was thinking, if you ever watch a movie that shows inside the White House, Oval Office, in the background there's a staff. Just about every presidency represented in the film has the Bronco Buster in the background. You can see them. Hey, there's those. A lot of times there's a lot. The other part of it was a lot of these things were commissions. So, like in the film, Cole commissioned this thing, and he didn't want somebody. This is his commission. He paid for it. He wanted. This is his statue. He wanted, and the mold is probably definitely destroyed. Yeah.
Okay, so to pretty back around, this is my first time here, so I'm learning about these steps. The film you showed, how much would Remington have to do what that showed for his stuff, which is small? He had to have a point guard, a point guard.
He probably a lot of his work. There's only a couple of them actually. Cowboy was one at the full size. He got a small model of him. I mean, so he worked at this size for the most part. So they wouldn't have been necessarily because he could back done the details on this.
So he wouldn't have gone through all this.
He would have done bronze part of it. He wouldn't have been large unless, of course, like the Cowboy had to be into a park in Philadelphia. But most of the private stuff was small stuff.
So it would your relative would have made the cast.
Yeah, he would have done
the only stuff that would have been done.
He would have done the way it would have worked. So just like
the first small cast.
He would have made the small thing because it's easy for him to stand around this thing. Our family would then come in and make a mold on that canvas. A piece mold, machines in it, up. And then once that mold was made, the blowing in to keep the separation, they'd make a plastic canvas. The partner would come along with a three-dimensional pentagram, and he'd make it large, but usually with 1/3 size before they went to the full size. And that's what I have at home. So I have 1/3 of the bust of the boulevard. Anyway, they would make that, our family, that he would make that, sculptor would come in, fix it all up. And then, he establish the details, and then we'd come back and family would come back and make mold of that. Then the process would be repeated with pointer up to the full size. It's either a large size, full size, or it's a mold size.
Thank you.
Anybody else? That's it? No more questions? Time up? All right, thank you very much for your time. All your family,